가면서 로드 스탐부 쓰었어. Lhasang sabe. 지금 이 길이 어디 빈자를. 니들은 그때 든 중이나. 아또제 사모도 딘데다 가스갈 좀 딘데 시작도 심레스 딘데. 그건 나랑 바바테. 담미 샤지제 딘데 중이나 미 토미난 디페스 가도 지금 하선 말. 간도 수준나는 바자시나. 담미 샤서베 지란다. Lhasang susta some that's domain.
Cataract is the leading cause of preventable blindness in Tibet. It affects perhaps 4% of the population over 40, which is much more common than we see in most places of the developing world. One cause for the high cataract rate is the exposure to very high levels of ultraviolet radiation here on the Tibetan plateau. With an average altitude of 15,000 feet above sea level, the human eye is simply exposed to an extraordinary amount of radiation, which prematurely causes aging in the eye, primarily showing up as cataract. When I asked myself what I could do to be of assistance to the Tibetan people, I chose to work in a single eye department of the largest hospital in Lhasang.
I don't see a bad cataract.
I go twice a year and I invite my colleagues from the community, such as Dr. Yogi Burke.
He's going to have surgery on the left eye.
Decided to train the doctors there to recognize the common diseases that they'll encounter.
At the end, suture first.
And more importantly, improve their surgical capacity so that they would have the skills and the tools to eliminate preventable blindness among their own people.
That would do. Okay. Okay, buddy.
When I made my first trip to Lhasa in 1995, I was able to conduct a basic survey of eye conditions in Lhasa and the surrounding farm communities. It was obvious that cataract was just a rampant and unaddressed scourge. Cataract is a surgically curable disease and has been so for many decades. But this operation, unfortunately, was not available in Tibet. The cataract that we speak of course, simply refers to the aging of the lens within the eye so that instead of being crystal and clear, it becomes clouded, so vision slowly gets dimmer and dimmer. Eventually, people literally are blind, cannot even see the hand in front of their face. Traveling further into Tibet, I began to recognize the extraordinary challenges of providing medical services in such a vast geographic area. The Tibetan Autonomous Region is literally 1/3 the size of Western Europe, with a population of perhaps 2.5 million people. There are virtually no roads, no public transportation to speak of, and only a few cities where people can be expected to come for care. Traditional Tibetan society has been divided among its farmers living in valleys miles apart, subsisting on what they can grow, and using farm tools and instruments that are often out of the Stone Age, quite literally. In the periphery of the geography is the nomadic culture, traveling among the high plateau, taking their herds of goat, sheep, and yak, following the paths of their ancestors for thousands of years. For these people, modern medicine and what it can offer are virtually unknown.
Nori, Mahile, Nori.
I've been taking a 1-month trip to Tibet every May and every September ever since 1995. And my dear friend Yogi Bert has joined me on numerous occasions. And together we've been able to keep this project going by the generosity of those whom we know. The first leg of our journey is to get from the United States to Kathmandu, Nepal. Now, getting to Kathmandu takes about 39 hours of travel, 3 airlines, and keeping track all the while of medical equipment that we're taking to Tibet.
There's no more flights tonight. There's no more flights tonight. What about our baggage?
Between flight delays, misconnections, language barriers, and sheer physical exhaustion, it is a very daunting first leg of a journey. Looks like we have to fight our way to Tibet.
It is a battle.
The path that led me to Tibet is a journey I've been on all my life. Growing up in Jewish Baltimore in the 1950s and the 1960s, I wanted to emulate my beloved father, who was a surgeon. In my early 20s, I decided to go to medical school, spend the next 10 years to become a physician. But it was a very high price to pay for me personally to undergo the rigors of training. And there were so few role models of people who were connecting with patients as other humans. And the very reasons that motivated me to go into medicine became more and more distant the further I got in the field. The very end of my medical training came to a perfect fruition with an invitation for me to come and teach in India. The great discovery for me in India was to see how spiritual the practice of medicine actually was. There were enormous masses of suffering humanity in India. The medical centers in India, the ones I was fortunate enough to visit, are temples. They are temples of love and service. These were people who were suffering and who were blind, and whose needs were being addressed with affection and respect as being other humans. And I saw that this, in fact, was exactly what I've been longing for.
Good morning, namaste.
Namaste. It's unlikely that we'll be able to get our visas tomorrow, and it looks like we're going to have to postpone the whole trip by 3 days and leave on Tuesday. The problem we found out was that while we were in transit to Asia, an American spy plane had made an emergency landing onto Chinese territory, and relations between the People's Republic of China and the United States had become very frosty. It seemed increasingly unlikely that we would get permission to enter into Lhasa at all. This is NBC bringing you the visa update. It's 4:25, and we have a breaking story here. We ain't going to Tibet soon, according to Chinese sources. And though I reassured our travel agent to tell the embassy that I do not fly planes and know nothing about the pilot's plans, she is uncertain if they are going to insist on us waiting 7 days before they give us a visa to enter into Tibet. We have no idea if we're going to get to Tibet.
자산이 예 말에 빈잔 줄기 이제 추송의 아치게 인지 야분들 이레스 근데전 게스트스인데
대가 추송의 때도 되네니 지자가는 미샤지제가 리그레 세tin데 추송신
다 수수나렌 타밀람스 제만이라 타미미 세브라 통받는 좀 있나 네, 다 공간도 말해. 차가베 잡대 섬세대도 말해라. 만나래 통만이지. 등한들 해서도 방한도 자스도 왔단 시장이 올라. 진짜 지게니 미시라지를 이래. 다 수세 다도 지랍들 연다 양은 것 같은데 예라.
Look, if these people want to just do their job, which is they know we're doctors and they know we're going into Tibet to do this work, then this brochure is fine. They'll always come up with excuses of what they want. So I'll give you the brochure. For days, our friends and I in Kathmandu negotiated with the Chinese embassy to see if there was anything that could be done to facilitate our entry. I have called to our colleagues in Lhasa to send us an emergency letter in Chinese addressed to the Chinese embassy clarifying our identities, our itinerary, and our several years' worth of working in Tibet on behalf of the Chinese health system. This is the plan. Of course, we are also trapped by contingencies such as there is no electricity in Kathmandu for the fax machine to receive this letter today. You tell me what things you need. What, an itinerary? But he would fly up in 10 days. He would fly up on a different time. But finally, somehow, somewhere, our efforts paid off, and the Chinese granted us our visas to re-enter into Tibet.
There's Yo-Yo.
At the very end of my teaching in India, I moved to San Francisco. And that began several decades of my ever-increasing enthusiasm and involvement for Buddhist meditation practice. Through a series of serendipitous events, supporters of His Holiness the Dalai Lama were traveling through San Francisco, and they mentioned that His Holiness had met many representatives of world religions, but he wasn't really clear about the Jewish faith. He knew that he had many Jewish supporters, and he wondered if it would be possible to learn more about it.
A copy of a chart that we use for meditation.
I put together what I thought would be a dream team of people who could meet with His Holiness for an afternoon and give him a crash course in Judaism.
It seems two different kinds ink. Some differences?
In this particular case, this Taurus, darker and lighter.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that is only because...
This precious opportunity to be in the physical, personal presence of the Dalai Lama profoundly moved me.
Now, presently we are passing through a very, very difficult period, and there is every danger to disappear Tibetan culture from this planet.
What the Chinese call the peaceful liberation of Tibet began in 1950 when the Chinese reclaimed what they said was a Chinese province, sending troops across the Tibetan border and into Lhasa itself. Eventually, this forced the Dalai Lama and over 100,000 Tibetans into exile in India and Nepal.
So naturally, you see, different people from the same kind of atrocity, same kind of unfortunate, dark experiences, then naturally we develop some kind of special closeness. So, thank you.
I took private vows, literally, in the presence of these meetings with His Holiness, that I would do all I could to help the Tibetan people with whatever skills I had to offer. You land in Lhasa Airport and you are in an entirely different universe. There are soldiers everywhere with machine guns. Your bags are meticulously searched for politically sensitive material, maybe just a picture of some lama from a preface to a book. And you realize that politics and suspicion permeate everything in Tibet, as it does much of China. But once we clear customs and we see our friends from First People's Hospital, like Dr. Tang Kui Ying, we realize that we have finally come back among our friends to work in Tibet.
Dr. Mar 他的项目主要是我们开始实施的时候是不是95年？
On that first trip, we met with the hospital administrators to explain to them the goals of the Tibet Vision Project. Not for us foreign doctors to come and perform surgeries, but to train the Tibetan surgeons themselves to become self-sufficient.
When I first showed up at the clinic, I found the clinic to be just a couple of rooms, essentially, not particularly clean. The amount of equipment they had was negligible, and what they did have was antiquated.
When we watched their cataract procedures, they were performing them without any magnification, tying sutures with their fingers.
The reason for the early trips that we made were to introduce the surgeons from the First People's Hospital into modern-day eye surgery.
And using sheep eyeballs that we bought in the marketplace, I was able to begin teaching them the basics of a cataract operation.
He will not be able to see with this eye.
Slowly but surely, they mastered each step of microscopic surgery.
We need this. This is like a primary hole in the posterior capsule. This is okay.
So that by the time we concluded our first trip, they had already performed their first cataract operation by themselves without assistance.
96年做了5月份、9月份2次，更多的白内障失明人数呢都在底下。
这是的嘞，这是的嘞，这是的嘞。
We'd arrive in these remote rural clinics and on that first day set up our medical equipment in these very primitive operating rooms. On the first day of an eye camp, a few patients would arrive. And as word got out, a torrent of patients would come. When all was said and done, we would expect to see somewhere between 200 and 400 patients in the eye camp. I had real concerns about the capacity of the doctors to manage this heavy surgical caseload.
여기 숨고, 어디? 여기 두고, 여기 두고.
主要的就说是一个是看门诊病人，那么再有一件其他的就像是抗青光眼手术。
In our very first eye camp, we performed exactly 108 operations over 3 days. This was an historic occasion, the first time that local Tibetan surgeons had successfully executed an eye camp of their own on this scale.
오늘 전당 안주미 지수 이제 삭제 제어 무슨지 저도 말고 그냥 그 변조도 안 되면 진행 안주 이제 제와 서면 안줘야 내 전단데 염마가지고 야 다들 야 이제 수고야 내배 이제 지금 수고 가서 스나리아 가져 교도 내버려 잡수
공로 자동 토소다 지나봐 그세를 버티면 쇼来吧
我们从96年开始做手术算起，一共12次。
그래서 제가 또 간다 좀 배미마 가서 때 가서 가서 너무 더 내세는 내네.
Beautiful.
되게 들이 그 상무고를 야고 좋은 사람들이 제일 내려서 나가줘도
The drive into the Tibetan capital of Lhasa takes us past the Potala Palace, the ancient home of the Dalai Lama before he went into exile in 1959. It sits over a city which has undergone tremendous changes in the past 50 years. From an ancient capital of Central Asia to what is now recognized as a small Chinese urban center. Narrow streets of old communities have been destroyed and widened for the large boulevards you see in large Chinese cities. It's a freewheeling entrepreneurial center which in ways is identical to any other medium-sized city you find in mainland China. The day after we arrived in Lhasa, it was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the First People's Hospital, the hospital which is our partner for the Tibet Vision Project.
Hello, ni hao, how are you?
I'm fine.
I'm very happy to see you.
各位来宾同志们，热烈庆祝西藏自治区人民医院建院50周年。在此，我代表院党委向所有关心我院建设与发展的领导、部门和个人表示衷心的感谢。
This was an orchestrated pageant in homage to the authority and power of the Communist Party and the authorities that continue to run the country.
他由此揭开了西藏卫生事业的新的历史篇章，促进西藏社会主义革命和建设，做出了突出的贡献，不愧是人民健康的忠诚卫士。
Truthfully, the lofty ideals of communist ideology, where people are helped according to their needs, not their means, is virtually nowhere to be found today. One of the early eye camps we did was in the city of Shigatse. This was really the first we had done in an urban community, and the patients were just as poor and just as desperate as any patients we had seen in the rural communities where we had done eye camps before. The nurses, technicians, and doctors at this particular hospital provided no assistance whatsoever. They literally were playing cards and reading newspapers when we were trying to set up to do the surgery, and the hospital director was completely absent. Just as we were ready to start recruiting the patients for surgery, it was brought to my attention that the hospital was charging the equivalent of about $10 American to every patient, which is about half their monthly income.
Don't charge any money. These people need the money back. Find the director. We're not charging any money.
When I tracked down the director, we had it out.
We are paying for everything. And we can only do this if the patients receive everything for free.
完了吗？我不是他的直接的合作伙伴，我没有接到任何卫生行政管理部门的通知。你就像您知道一样，这是在用这个电，这是在用我们的手术室。
It doesn't cost him one penny for water, and his electricity doesn't work. No other hospital, no other director with the Health Bureau or without the Health Bureau has ever asked my patients to pay, and they are not going to pay today.
What the director was looking for was really a handout, and he didn't care if it came from our project or from the patients.
我可以给他这么说，你们国家富裕，还用的一些设备，还有高压消毒锅，这些电的费用啊，水。
It was a standoff, and it was a very instructive moral dilemma for us, which we are still wrestling with. On the one hand, our project is generously donated by people who want to help the poor of the poor and who expect that their donations will get to the poor without having to pay a certain percentage in bribery. On the other hand, this is where we're working, and we have to work through the system and participate in the Chinese concept of guangqi, which is pretty much like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
So maybe he and I can come up with a solution here. And I'm thinking, what I'm suggesting is maybe we will simply donate eye drops at the end of the eye camp. And I also have some reading glasses that we can give to the doctors and nurses.
The conclusion we came to was that our project would leave the director some goods that he could use, probably resell. Sunglasses, eye drops, medicines that would help people. And in exchange, he promised, and in fact did, return the cash money that he was charging our patients. We did over 100 cases that trip, and it was without the assistance of a single member of the hospital staff. One of the saddest parts of the eye camp is we do run into a significant number of children who are blind and for whom there is nothing we can do as eye surgeons. There are many defects that arise in the eyes of children who have been malnourished, who may have had measles when they were small, who have birth defects of various kinds, and for whom there is nothing we can do as eye surgeons.
The money to make your phone call if they don't have the money, okay? And when they talk to the people in the school in Lhasa, they will know about Galu, and then they will come to Shagatse and talk to you perhaps.
A lot of people think to be sighted is always a better life. I'm not totally agreeing on that. In my opinion, it's very, very important that blind people realize that they don't have to be ashamed to be blind. And this is very, very important for our children to really realize that they don't have to be embarrassed. And this, in my opinion, is the first and major step in rehabilitation.
The project for blind children in Lhasa is invariably the happiest place in all of Tibet. Sabriya, herself blind, has set up shop in Tibet in the last 5 years, and what we see is just extraordinary. A blind child in Tibet is either locked in a room, occasionally they're even chained to their beds, they are given no education, minimal amount of nutrition. They're basically considered as creatures waiting to die.
When the others sing, he sings something totally different.
Sabriya can take a child from that place of horror, and by her own example that she sets, which means that all the teachers who are mostly sighted in her group look at her and realize there's no limitation to this woman. These children can have full lives.
Anima was always a very quiet child, and then something very beautiful happened. She became a very, very confident child. When it comes to questions about her sight, then she normally says, "I'm blind, but I can see."
Sabriya has provided new lives to 30, 40, 50, 100 children who will now go out into Tibet, and they will recognize other blind children and kindle the lights behind their blind eyes so that they can continue to live full lives. This woman has started a revolution.
I'm standing here in the back of the First People's Hospital. Our 3 Land Cruisers are ready to go to the eye camp, and we're off to Sokshen.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you.
Our wonderful staff, which is in good spirits now, usually you're turning green and ready to puke in about 6 hours. It's just an exhausting trip.
My Pishla, thank you for everything, my friend.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
As this is basically an extended road trip for the Tibetans and us foreigners, there's an opportunity for our team of doctors, nurses, technicians, and drivers to bond in a meaningful way, which is essential to the mission of our project.
It's 10 after what? We left 5.5 hours ago, and we're about a quarter there.
By the second day of our travels to Dzogchen, the charm and beauty of traveling through Tibet had worn thin, with vehicles breaking down all the time and having to contend with washed out roads, broken bridges, and stalled trucks in the one-lane roads. After taking 2 days to travel a little less than 300 miles, we finally arrived in Dzogchen and began to prepare the starting of the eye camp the next day.
그냥 좀 앉지 못했다 할 때만 소미 사실지기 다 드리님은 주담서 주지 다 드리님은 주담서 주지
This is not a good place for anything right now.
Today was a real crash.
This is not acceptable.
We made this extraordinary effort to get here, traveling for 2 solid days. And instead of duplicating the eye camp facility, which is the building behind me here, which was built 2 years ago, wasn't available when we started it, but which really was ideal for last year's eye camp, they attempted to put us in a building that's 30 years out of date, absolutely filthy dirty, totally inappropriate for the flow of patients, and an operating room that looks like something out of a penal colony on Devil's Island.
Why aren't we operating in a new building again?
In inquiring, well, what happened to the new building, they were saying to me that this building here was being used for inpatients and was not available for eye surgery.
I want to go look at the second building. If we have to move the patients, we move the patients.
I'm insisting that we come over here and let me inspect it. The door was locked.
What are they using this building for?
Patients, inpatient.
There are no inpatients if the door is locked. There are no patients upstairs.
The operating room area was totally unused, and the floors were full of rat feces.
Not a single patient anywhere. They're lying.
There are no patients upstairs. The bedrooms all have televisions, which is not something that hospitals in Tibet provide patients. The hospital employees were using this place as their own hotel.
If they want the eye camp, we're doing it in here. If they don't want us to put it in here, we're going back to Lhasa tonight. Okay?
The principle is that if resources are made available, like a new building, the standard default behavior of the elite Chinese and Tibetan that are running the medical services is, well, we'll just use it for ourselves. And I think that happens to be the default form of corruption, which just is endemic.
Right over here. So we can run the general.
When I come to an eye camp, I'm trying to establish the criteria which, as far as I'm concerned, are not negotiable. It's not negotiable that we'll do second-rate surgery on patients because they're poor, and it's not negotiable that we won't make every effort to provide the highest quality procedures. That's not negotiable.
I want them to bring electricity to this building. If they want to watch television with their girlfriends, they can do it. I want the electricity. I am willing to be the bad guy. All this stuff out. All this stuff out. Okay?
To be the inappropriately angry Western guy, as long as we can, in fact, provide the highest quality service to these patients who deserve it simply because they're blind and they need help. Once I had my tantrum, once I made it very clear to them that either they're going to give us this building or we're going back to Lhasang tomorrow, they in fact are doing everything. We'll do the eye surgery here, this will work fine, this will work. Okay, well, we can do his right cataract, okay? The sad truth is that we cannot help a large percentage of the patients that we see. And it is always difficult to tell these people who have come from so far that there is nothing we can do for them. We are basically equipped only to do cataract surgery. However, other eye disease or infections which have led to scarring or blindness of the retina are things that at present we are unable to help with here in Tibet.
Dickie, the right eye is blind. There's nothing we can do for it. A blood vessel has closed in the back of the eye, and it's very painful. There's nothing I can do for it.
당한 내 때만 말하는 나얀 접착이지.
How long has he not been able to see out of that eye?
2 years.
Open your eyes. He's going to have to need surgery on the left eye.
다른 속에 밑줄 쭉쭉. 계속 때 시지라. 다른 쭉쭉을 수 있는 데서 건다 디스코드.
야, 你就凑个个儿，那你这我，这都我对的。哦，我还要你这带说啊，他凑满钱啊。
哦，那是。
Dr. Teng Hu-ying's surgical skills are absolutely superb. She can now do a perfect cataract operation in 15 minutes. And has even advanced to the point where she's one of the few surgeons in all of China who can do what's called a sutureless cataract procedure, meaning that she can construct a wound whereby the cataract is removed, a lens implant is inserted, and the eye is closed without any sutures of any kind. This reduces the chance of infection, reduces the time for the operation, and facilitates the very rapid vision recovery of the patient. Dr. Teng Hu-ying was precisely what our project had hoped to find in Tibet. Someone with native skills and gifts that would respond to our training and our equipment. She's now a trainer of other surgeons in Tibet.
It's nearly 8:30 at night, so we've been working for about 10 and a half hours today with an hour off for lunch, probably another half hour, 40 minutes to go. And my two Tibetan surgeons are whooped, and we'll sleep well tonight.
一会儿用那个蓝的，一会儿用白的接着，怪啥子样的？
Did which then road the China zombie.
那你定价咋做的？
没了。다른 거니 남준날 추승할 수 있어. 남준들이야. 인지랑 남준이나 이제들 내 사주자 같은데. 그 사이에 잡힌도 용스.
다시 보지나 냠도 다시 아요.
세는 어디 세는 좀 더 안 좋은데.
The last night of the eye camp is an evening of joyous release for everybody. So the drivers and the nurses and the doctors all join in this celebration, which really feels like the heart of Tibetan generosity.
做了不少的工作，非常感谢你就替我说一下。多谢谢啊，多谢谢啊。
When you grasp the epidemiology of blindness, and it's overwhelming, but this is a very, very good first step. I think it'll be a really good camp. And it's a real joy. It's a real joy.
Thank you. All of you. Thank you. Thank you.
The conclusion of an eye camp is always a great relief. The energy and attention necessary to make everything come out as well as we can make it is considerable.
Beautiful.
Okay. But what I primarily feel invariably brings me to tears.
How many? Nita. Ah, Yabadu. Good. Very good for you.
I'm moved by the miracle of our modern world where we can restore vision in just a few minutes and make a person's life turn a whole new page.
Nida, Yabadu.
For people to go back to a world that they just can vaguely remember.
We come here from a long, long distance to teach and to train the Tibetan doctors into modern eye surgery, and the Tibetan doctors who we have trained have become better than the teachers.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I am always moved by the beauty of the Tibetan people. They are so generous and so gracious in offering us what they can, which is a silk scarf with the most heartfelt sense of thank you.
Gentlemen, how do? Okay.